We have Terrel Bernard, who was the linebacker out of Baylor that, as you guys can probably see, I'm a lot higher on, it seems, compared to the national media. I've seen places that have him like outside the top 200 prospects, and frankly, I put on the film and I see a lot to like. I have him graded as, an early fourth rounder, and frankly, if you're a team that's going to put him in the right scheme and use him in the right way, I wouldn't mind him being taken even a little bit earlier than that as well. In terms of some of my notes, and just to give you an idea of the type of prospect he is, so out of 5 in terms of size and athleticism, based on like his combine results, I gave him a 1.5 on size and a 4.25 on athleticism. So we're talking about an undersized linebacker, to say the least. He is, he's not short or anything necessarily. He's 6'1", but he's 224 pounds. And, you look at him and you could almost argue that he should be a safety at times, right? Just based on the way he plays. But, in that regard, one of his best traits, in my opinion, it is just his coverage ability, his ability to cover a lot of range, his quickness and change of direction, all those athletic traits that kind of result from being that smaller, twitchier guy. I think Bernard has just about all of them. So going through these very quickly, I gave him a 14 out of 15 on range. Initially, my first note was good range. I crossed out good and wrote great, and then I obviously gave him one of the highest scores I've given any linebacker in that category this draft season. Coverage skills, I thought he did great in terms of just fluidly turning and going with guys, whether it was man, whether it was zone. The only thing that was an issue at times was if he would be matched up maybe on, say, a bigger tight end or someone that maybe he did kind of pale in comparison to in terms of the size, right? That was really the only time, because in terms of the speed and the fluidity, he had the ability to do it all, really no problem. He's the type of guy that, even though he is technically a linebacker, I would even be willing to drop him in some deeper zones as well. If you listen to some of my videos on, say, Leo Chenal or Damon Clark, I'm saying, like, yeah, you could drop him in a flat zone maybe. No, I feel comfortable with Terrel Bernard doing pretty much anything in the intermediate to even sometimes deep area of the defense. So I think he's a very versatile piece in the way you can use him there. I thought he had a very good motor. I give him a 9.25 out of 10 on motor, which is in fact the highest motor grade I've given any of the 25 linebackers I've graded on this criteria over the past 2 years. So we're talking about an athletic freak and somebody who is going to go longer and harder than his opponents. And in that regard, he's going to be super productive and bring down a lot of guys in terms of his tackling and whatnot, as long as he can get good angles and good shots on them. Again, because I hate to keep saying it, but just the size and strength isn't quite where you would expect it to be as a linebacker. He's obviously a will linebacker, in my opinion. That's why I say, as long as you get a team that drafts him and plans to use him right, I don't think he really has much utility in, say, a 3-4 defense. To me, he is a will linebacker in a 4-3, or one of the smaller like safeties that sub in, say a sub package defense where maybe you're running like a 3-3-5 or something like that, right? He could be one of those linebackers, one of those DBs. It doesn't really matter in that regard, as long as he's playing somewhat close to the line of scrimmage, because that's where he really did some good work. He was pretty solid in terms of being able to read and react to what was going on in front of him, and doing so quickly. Not the best by any means. There was a little bit of wasted movement because he was trying to, move first and read later at times, whereas, a lot of the other linebackers, you would rather them, get a good read on it first and then move. But for him, with the quickness by which he was moving, he made a lot of things that maybe weren't the right first couple steps. He made them look right on the back end, just because of that athleticism made up for it. So I would say get him as a will linebacker, line him up 5-6 yards off the ball, maybe lined up out wide on, say, a slot receiver at times, on a tight end that's detached from the line of scrimmage, or inside the box as sort of that last extra run defender, because that's really where the real weakness is. In terms of block shedding, I gave him a 3.5 out of 15. I think you guys kind of understand why. One of the notes I wrote in all caps was contact equals avoid, right? We do not want him taking on blocks. He looks like a safety, and in that regard, I would say he almost plays like a safety. But luckily for him, he is so quick and able to change direction so quickly that oftentimes, even if he is trying to shoot a gap, he'll beat a tackle or a guard or a center to the spot that they need to get to, right? As a former offensive lineman, I can tell you, like, it would be almost impossible to plan for and be able to take the angles that are required to cut off Bernard with your feet. Now, if you get a hand on him, toast, right? But with your feet, really, really tough. Really, really tough guy to block, in my opinion, on the inside. Now that'll that'll be a little bit easier for guys at the next level, considering the O-linemen are only bigger, faster, and stronger. They're the best in the world at what they do. But at college, at least, you saw that. You saw him as an issue to some guys climbing to the second level just off the athleticism alone. A couple other notes really quickly that I wanted to make. I thought he was sometimes a little bit too relaxed on his underneath coverage. So what I mean by that is there were a lot of guys that would run, say, like drags and slants and whatnot, where he would, they would run into his zone, and it almost felt like he knew how athletic he was, so he would almost cede the shorter route in lieu of potentially giving up something larger, if that makes sense. So instead of pushing up on that drag as soon as he sees that it's coming across, or pushing up on the slant, it's almost as though he would like to trail back behind, because he knew, that guy can make the catch, I can bring him down easily, but if I'm all pressed up on that guy, then I can't help on anybody else's routes. And that's good, but at the same time it's bad, because he was almost surrendering more catches than I think he necessarily needed to, than if he just, as soon as he recognized, okay, this is a drag, or this is a slant, or an in, or a curl, if he just pushed up on it, I thought he would have allowed significantly less receptions than he did. Not big receptions. He didn't allow many yards after the catch on the ground, because he was generally correct that he could cover that space very quickly and bring that guy down, fast, but sometimes he was just letting up too many receptions underneath. I also thought occasionally, and this was another one of my issues with him in the box, is that he would undercut blockers at times, meaning that instead of taking them on head-on or running over the top of them, he would try and backdoor them. And in a gap-style defense, if you give up your gap and miss the play, you miss the running back or the wide receiver, whatever it is, oftentimes that potentially leads to larger plays than there would have been initially had you just taken them head on. And that was one of the notes I wrote, exactly, that undercutting blockers has sometimes seeded larger plays than necessary. So in that regard, I would say he's got the athleticism to undercut them, but maybe slow down a little bit on that at the next level, or limit it a little bit, like only if you're absolutely sure that you can make the tackle. Maybe if it's against a smaller back that you can bring down with an arm tackle, opposed to some of these guys, because it just felt like he would undercut them, make a diving attempt towards their back half, opposed to taking them on head on through the blocker, which he probably wouldn't have won anyway, but at least he could have slowed things up and let other guys rally, whereas instead he would almost give up his gap and in some instances give up some larger plays than required. But like I said, as a will linebacker, that is probably the least important of the three linebackers in terms of stopping the run, because you're most often flexed outside of the box and lined up against slots and tight ends and whatnot. I think Bernard would be a very fun player. Like I said, my grade scale, it's a little bit extreme in terms of how extreme of a player he is, because like I said, he's almost more of a safety, and he'd probably grade higher on my safety scale, all things considered, because the block shedding is weighted less heavily. But it is what it is. It came out to a 69.09. I would say early day 3 would be a really solid place for him. And if you're a team that runs a 3-4 and want him as a will linebacker, safety hybrid type player, maybe even the end of day 2, I really wouldn't be opposed to that. So with that being said, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you guys leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, tell me. I assume you're here because your team got Bernard. I don't obviously know who that is. I'll be very curious to see, because like I said, I think he will rely on the schematic fit and maybe having a good D-line in front of him. But if you think your team matches those qualifications, I don't think there's a reason to be upset with this pick. But tell me in the comments, do you like Bernard? Do you like what he brings to the table in terms of just being a playmaker on that sort of second and sometimes third level of the defense? Because I know I'm a Lions fan, and I think I would like Bernard in sort of that fourth, maybe even late third range, all things considered. So I have for you guys in this one. I'm mic'd up, now I'm mic'd out. Peace, guys. Hopefully I will see you next time.